Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Lookout. So, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is, in this film, playing Chris Pratt. But it's not actually Chris Pratt. It's some guy named Chris Pratt, which I thought was funny. And so, the story of this film. We have Chris. This is kind of like the teeing up part of this film. We have Chris, who is to have everything that a guy could wish for. And he's to be this kind of hockey athlete. Everything seems to be going great. It seems like he's going to get a scholarship. And it seems that Chris is to be doing so well in hockey, so on and so forth. Everybody is to just really see this guy and be like, man, I wish I could be him. And then Chris is to go on and is to drive along this road. And that all is to be taken away with one car accident. So Chris is to, of course, go into a coma and then wake up to eventually not remember things all that well. And is to go on and have to have his whole entire room labeled with all these things that he needs to go on and understand about certain items. So Chris, of course, is to go on and is to always have this notebook where it's to kind of help him figure out things. So Chris is to tend to kind of thumb through this notebook every time he, of course, is to not know something or like feel like he needs to like double check on something. So going into this story, we have Chris, who eventually is to be this janitor at this bank, because that's really all that that he can really go on and do. And so Chris is to have this whole list of stuff that he has to kind of perform within the night. And so Chris goes on and eventually, while like being a janitor at this bank, on his night off, he is to go on and meet with a guy named Gary. That is to mention that he was to, of course, had been in a relationship with Chris's brother, or Chris's sister from time to time. And so Chris is just like, okay, that's all right. So all of a sudden, Chris is to meet a girl who's just calling herself Lovely, because I guess that's her stage name. And so it's like, okay, that's kind of weird. It's kind of weird to have like said like to this guy like your stage name, but maybe I guess you're gonna change your name to that at some point. But still, so it seems that Chris is to really just be naive with these characters, and because Chris just wants friends, like Chris just wants people that are to not think of Chris as the guy that had so much potential and was snuffed out, and that's all that they think about. That's all that they want to just look at this guy and just like, man, like you had it all, and you just flushed that down the toilet. So Chris is to go on and like have this relationship with a girl named Lovely, but we also have Chris who's to live with a guy named Lewis who is blind. And I'm like, God, like Jeff Daniels does some really interesting and creative characters, and this has to be like one of them. There was also one story where Jeff Daniels was to be this author with an imaginary friend named Ryan Reynolds that was to be this kind of like superhero, and thoroughly enjoyed that movie. I think it was called like Paper Man or something like that. Um, yeah, really enjoyed that movie. But like Jeff Daniels, like man, he goes on and does some really creative characters in a bunch of movies, and like this is another one of those. So we go into this film, and so slowly but surely, we find out why Chris is with Gary and with Lovely, and we find out it's because simply Chris was to be a janitor at this bank. So that seems to transition us to tell us that it seems that Chris is going to be involved one way or another, whether he wants it to or not, to be involved in a bank heist. And it seems that Chris is going to go on and want to eventually just easily just like, well, yeah, uh like I should go on and get my slice too. But then it seems that more and more we find out that Chris is to realize, well, like no, like this isn't right. Like I don't know if I should go through with this, and so on and so. Very interesting story. We have a very complex kind of thing going on here, and plus also a very unique story. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly liked it, and hopefully I'm going to be able to thoroughly be able to go on and go into details into spoilers because I think it's about that time yet again. Where can you find this film? Currently, it's available on Stars right now. Stars has a pretty decent amount of content within it. So, like, if you're really looking for an app to dare in fact find some good movies, Stars really is a place, as well as certain other kind of apps eventually, like a Cinemax or possibly Showtime every once in a while has some decent content. Like they have Dexter's and all kinds of stuff. But anyways, but here's also a way that you can say that you can see this movie for absolutely free. You can go on to a Google search and search the word letter C movies. So that's a letter, and then that's a word, and then you would add another word to it called app. Dare in fact search for this app into a Google search, and you'll be able to find an app you can hopefully download and be able to say that you could see this movie for absolutely free, as well as a number of other things like premium access stuff, a bunch of shows that you know would probably have you forcibly go into certain apps so that way you could say you can finally see them. It would all be on that app there. Regardless of what I say after this, search the word Fox HD movies, because really the logo will say Fox HD movies, but the title will say Play 1080p HD movies. And then you can also go on to the Google Play Store and search the word TV Crush, which will also have a logo that'll say HD movies with a crown off to the side, a little king crown. You can download that and maybe be able to see the lookout on that. Not quite sure because I didn't check through that app. But there, in fact, you'll be able to see a cluster of movies for absolutely free without any kind of fees of any kind. So, with that in mind, let's just go into that double five time territory because it's about that time to just go into this thing that is to be called Spoiler Time. Spoiler Time, it's about the time we get to spoil this movie. So, like I said, like I'm not gonna do this movie perfectly like the film is, but I'm gonna kind of go into a way about things similar. So, the very beginning of this film, we of course have Chris, who is to, of course, be this hockey player, and he has to score this goal, the winning goal of this game. Everyone's like, yeah. And so now we have Chris, who's going on with him and three other people. Of course, one of them being a girl named Kelly, and two other people that are just kind of in the back of the car. So Chris is to go on and just drive on this road, and it seems possible that these characters are drunk. Not quite sure. But Chris, of course, is driving down this road, and it seems like there is a number of dragonflies and stuff like that that they can kind of see upon this road. And also, like, to me, it seemed more like it was like snowing or whatever. Like, and that's what they were kind of like looking at. But, anyways, so Chris is to go on and is to turn off his lights so they can kind of uh, see things better, as far as like going on and like seeing these dragonflies or seeing like whatever they're seeing kind of drop down. And so the longer and longer that Chris is without these lights on his car, the more it seems that we have the passengers going on and telling Chris, it's like, well, hey, like, you should probably put your lights back on now. Like, I think, like, it's been long enough since you've had these lights on. And plus, like, Chris probably isn't driving really in the perfect, like, lane, because he may not even know where exactly he's driving anymore. So, Chris is to wait far too long to, of course, turn on these lights. And we see this farming equipment right in the middle of the road. And so we then go on and are to see like the after effect of that. Chris, of course, to have this major head injury, and he, of course, to be taking the shower, and he has to kind of remember that he is taking a shower with soap, and is to go on and have all these items that have labels all over them and everything like that. So come to find out, somewhere in this story, Chris is to mention, I think, to Lovely that in this car accident he was to be thrown a good distance, and he was to be put into a coma for a number of days. And so when he did wake up, he didn't even remember his father's name, or didn't remember to say dad. He ended up calling his dad a name of one of their dogs instead. So we have Chris that, of course, is to go on and is to go throughout his day. And so we have this this social worker, I believe that's Janet. And so when Chris is talking to Janet, we of course have Janet that's asking, like, well, hey, like, what are you gonna do besides like go on and like and do this work and stuff like that? Like, are you gonna go on and like have a girlfriend or something like that? And Chris, of course, is like, well, like, how about we go on and go to a movie together? And Janet's like, well, that's nice and all, but no. And so Janet is like, well, like, are you ever gonna like get a girlfriend? Or and so Chris is to mention to Janet, it's like, well, I've thought about like sleeping with you a number of times. And Janet's like, well, that's great and all, but like, I'm getting paid to like to take care of you, so like I'm not going to be taking care of you in that manner. So Janet is to go on and on, talking with Chris, to kind of like see where his life is going to head next. And like Chris probably doesn't see that there's like anything further that's really going to go on in his life. Like he's just kind of stuck here now. So, because Chris is to go on, and every day is to see Kelly, who of course was the girl he was driving with, and he would kind of see her all the time, just kind of walk back and forth to these locations. Chris would consistently go back. Chris would go back to that road that everything was taken from him. And so Chris would go on and take a shower with soap. And at some points, he would cry for no reason. And like he would list all these things. And so at some point, Chris is to have this class that is to try to help him like figure out how to kind of work past his problem, and is to like help him try to figure out how to like make a list of things, so, or how to make a story. So we have Chris that makes it back home, and like Chris was to mention that at some point after Lewis was to leave, Lewis was trying to make coffee and he couldn't really understand how to. And so when Chris was to come home, we had Lewis who had left this message explaining to Chris how to make this food. And we find out Lewis is to be like a telemarketer, which I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting. Like, I guess, like that would make a lot of sense for Lewis to just kind of be this like telemarketer, and like be able to like talk to these people and so on and so forth. So, so Lewis is at work, and so Chris is to have to make this canned food thing, and so all of a sudden Chris is to not realize where the can opener is, or he doesn't understand what like the can, what's like, how can he get into these cans. And so Chris just starts to get frustrated and is like thrashing things around because he's just so upset. And so at one point Chris is calling Lewis, just very upset, and he's like, where is the can opener? Like, I don't know where the can opener is. So we have Lewis that is to like finish up with this job, make his way home, and is to realize that there's a can on the ground, and like somehow Chris figured out how to open one of these cans, but like, and I'm sorry if I laughed there, but it was just like, just the scene of this guy like trying so hard just to do like and just a common everyday thing. It's just like, wow, like the sad part of it is just the difficulty of certain people's lives. So Lewis is to go on and is to start making the food and putting everything together. And so Lewis is just asking about Chris's day. And so Chris is saying that he has a problem making a story. And Lewis is just like, well, then just like tell me any story that you've ever heard in your life. And like tell me about the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Tell me about that story. So Chris, of course, is to like try to figure out the story, and he's like, it's like, well, Lewis is like, well, wait a minute, like, Chris, like, you know the ending of the story, right? It's like, well, yeah, like the Goldilocks like meets up with the Three Bears, and yeah, I know how that ends. And so Lewis is like, well, okay, well, if you know how it ends, like, how do we build up to that moment? So Chris is starting to mention the obvious spots where like the girl was sleeping, and that the bears had come into the house, and had noticed that like somebody's been sitting in their chair, and like somebody's been like in the porridge and stuff like that. Like I'm ad libbing here, but it is what it is. So Lewis is just like, well, like technically you know how to do a story. It's just you want to like the order of which that you present it is going to be different than anyone else's. You're going to go on and tell the ending of the story and then work your way back instead of having the beginning presented right away. So and Lewis is telling Chris, hey, write that down so that way you can know how to put together a story. So, Chris, of course, is to go on and is to work as this janitor for this bank. And I guess this is like late at night. So, Chris is to work at this bank, and so it seems that Chris's boss, who of course is Mr. Tuttle, is to go on and mention that it seems that they are to want Chris to have them to like really like double the cleaning, because I guess there's going to be some important people coming in, probably like corporate or something like that. For I'm sure if this is like a bank franchise, like yeah, I'm sure we're probably gonna have like some corporate guy coming in and like just kind of seeing how things are going at this Noel bank. So we have at one point where Chris is to desperately ask Mr. Tuttle, because he's been talking with Mrs. Lange, and so Chris at one point is to go on and ask Mr. Tuttle, like, well, hey, like, is it possible that I can go on and maybe work like a register? Because Chris had gone on and has really been trying to practice like money exchanges. And Chris thinks that he can possibly be like really good at it now. And really, Mr. Tutt is kind of looking at Chris, and in his mind, it's probably just like I can't trust you with money. Like, I can pay you, like I can pay you with the check, but like I don't know, like we really have Mr. Tuttle that's like I don't know if I can really like trust you behind a register. Sadly enough, so. So this guy walks off, and so Chris is to just kind of go on. And in my mind, we have this officer that keeps coming by the bank consistently within this story. So we have this cop that keeps continuing to come over, and he goes over and talks to Chris, like tells him like, hey, how are things going? And also kind of consistently delivers him donuts. So this, of course, is actually heaven forbid it's in freaking IMDb easily, right? You've got to be kidding me. Yeah, not in there. Oh, Deputy Ted. There we go. So we have Chris who's consistently talking with this guy, and this guy consistently delivers donuts, and he's like reminding him certain things. It's like, oh, okay, cool. So, and also like his wife, I guess, is pregnant. So, in this story, Chris is to go on and do his job, and so he has the day off, and so he goes to this bar, and so all of a sudden he bumps into a guy named Gary, who, of course, Gary is to mention that he was to have dated Chris's sister at some point, and so like that obviously is to make Chris and Gary just quickly friends, because Chris, besides Lewis, doesn't really have much of any friends. So Gary is to go on and like speak. Uh, Gary's to go on and speak with Chris and mention how like these girls, like, man, they're good looking, huh? Like, man, they can really put on a sweater. So so of course, like, Chris like really wants to be with somebody, but it's just like it doesn't work out. So we have Gary that is to go on and walk off. And so at some point, we have Chris who continues to go to this bar and is to talk to this girl, or is to talk to one of these girls and just kind of say some line that doesn't work out. And then all of a sudden, a girl named Lovely is to approach Chris and is to want to spend some time with him. So much so that she is to try and seduce Chris, and is to also that like she remembers Chris because she used to go to one of his games, and Chris, of course, is to remember that game for some reason or another, because like there's certain parts of his memory that is still there. So have Chris who is to go on with Lewis to like, I think it's a like a Thanksgiving uh, at of course Chris's parents' house. So we have Chris that goes on to his parents' house, and Chris, of course, is uh, like having this dinner, and it seems like Chris is having some difficulties with certain meals and stuff like that, possibly trying to figure out whether he likes something or not. Um, Remembering possibly if he likes something or not, or just having some difficulties with certain silverware, sadly. So we have kind of Lewis who is to like mention about certain meals and stuff like that. So we have Chris at one point playing chess with his father Robert, and so Chris is to tell his father, it's like I can't play chess with you anymore. Like, I just can't, because of course Chris is to not only get like checked by his dad, but then is to get checkmated by his dad. And Chris is like, well, okay, well, like, I guess you lost, or I guess I lost. Wow, that's too bad. Like, Chris is going on and looking at this gun collection, and he is to really like one of these new guns that I guess his dad was to have, or maybe just Chris doesn't remember much about these guns. So at one point, we have Chris who is talking with his sister, and so Chris is to bring up that there's a friend of his at this bar that this girl had dated. And the girl's like, don't remember that, but I guess maybe I did at some point. I don't know. Like, and so this girl walks off, and I'm immediately just like, oh, this is just like Deception from 2008, where it's like you have a guy with a memory problem and you're trying to take advantage of him, and that's sad. So as Chris and Lewis are to go on, and so Chris and Lewis at one point in this dinner are talking about how they want to put a business together. I'm like, good for them. Like, I like, great. And so Lewis and Chris are to have this plan that they want to put together, and they want to make this restaurant. And Lewis is to call it lose your lunch, because I guess Lewis's nickname is to be called Lou, and so they want to make this restaurant called Lose Your Lunch. So like I was like, what a weird name, but I guess that's always going to be very memorable. So, like, really, what they're like thinking about doing is to just really have like this store be open, just for like breakfasts and lunch, because I guess they don't need to put together like dinner because possibly dinners could be possibly far too complicated. So it's like, well, then why not just kind of keep the store open as long as possible and just kind of have like the same like breakfast and lunch meals, just like have those throughout the day. Like there's some people that miraculously um, will go on, and if the food is so good, Perkins used to go on, and they used to be really famous for pancakes. Like eventually that place folded, but still, yeah, Perkins used to have these like whamidine like pancakes, and people would just go there just for the pancakes and nothing else. It's probably why they ran out of business. But and then IHOP, that kind of folded too, but still. But yeah, so you would have these places that are just known for one thing, which is just really their breakfast. And then after that, it would just be like, well, like, we ain't got much else. So of course we go on and we have Robert who is asking Chris, it's like, well, hey, what can you really do like at this place? Like I can't see like you having much responsibility working at this place. And like really like both Lewis and Chris, they're kind of questioning whether these guys should have their own business. It just kind of seems like very like out of all the people, I guess, that they could have picked um, to put together a business. But I'm like, no, like give them a shot, give them a chance, because Chris and Lewis are going to uh, this bank guy to like ask for this loan, and so it seems like this guy's like, I don't know, and but eventually towards the end of the movie it seems like they do get that loan. I'm like, okay, great, like they're able to put that business together. I'm like, that's awesome. So it's kind of like the end of like Multiplicity, where like all three of the Michael Keatons go on and make this like pizza joint, and like uh, the one Steve is to go on and be like their delivery boy, but like he delivers like papers during the beginning of his day. Anyways, pushing on. So as Chris and Lewis are driving off, we have Lewis that turns to Chris and tells him, it's like, you know what, you should probably like never go on and do like holidays back at your house. Like you should never do it again. You're just gonna regret it. So we go on and we have Chris, who continues to be with Gary and Lovely. And so the relationship escalates, and so Chris to go on and get laid, and Chris is to tell Lewis about it because Lewis is to hear Chris coming home late as Lewis is kind of playing with this guitar. So Lewis is to ask Chris, is like, well, wait a minute, like you met a girl, like does girl have a name? So Chris is say it's like her name is Lovely, and Lewis is like, that seems like a bizarre name for a woman, because it doesn't seem like a normal name. And Chris is to say it's like, well, technically it's this girl's stage name, and Lewis is like, okay, that also seems. Why wouldn't she tell her guy that she's gonna possibly be with her real name? So but Chris is just naive and just wants a relationship. So like, it's how things are as far as like just Chris and just desperation. So Chris goes on and is to continue to sleep with this woman to the point where he even is to bring her to his place. And in the middle of the night, we have Lewis, who's just kind of like out and about, and is to hear like Lovely possibly making it to the bathroom or something like that. So Lewis all of a sudden is to speak with Lovely, and Lewis is to ask Lovely, it's like, well, hey, why are you here? And Lovely's like, because like I'm with Chris, like because like, and so Lewis is like, well, wait a minute, like you like the more and more that like we have Lewis who's starting to like pull at this thread and is to try to figure out like that Lovely was to tell like Chris this girl's stage name instead of her real name, and Lewis has also asked Lovely for her real name, which she doesn't go on and tell him. And then Lewis is like, well, like, so everything about you is technically like fake. So why are you here? Like, why are you going on and like continuing to like put on this charade? Uh, so, because what happens is when Chris is to spend time with Gary at his place, and eventually Gary is to tell Chris, like, well, hey, man, we've gone on and, like, we decided that we're going to go and start robbing banks. And Chris is like, really? Like, okay, like, which bank did you decide to rob? And Gary's like, well, yours. And so Chris is like, what? And Gary's like, yeah, we've been following you. We've been kind of going on and just kind of watching your schedule and everything like that. So, like, yeah, so we decided that if anything, like, we want to, like, incorporate you in on this. We want you to be the inside man. And Chris is like, well, I don't know about that. And Gary's like, well, wait a minute. Like, you know what? Like, I look at you and I look at a guy that had so much potential and now all of it's gone. Like, I look at you and I see a guy that shouldn't be where he is. And that, like, you should be a man with power. And with money comes power. And so, like, you should write that down. So, it seems that Chris is to be manipulated by Gary. And Gary also is to tell Chris, is like, well, it seems that your father is helping you afford a number of things because, of course, your father is, like, rich. So, but, like, Gary is to realize that Chris's father is to keep him on a leash of sorts. And so Gary is to ask Chris, it's like, well, hey, how about you go on and you call your father and ask and see if he can loan you $10,000. And if he's not willing to give you that kind of money, then how about you just ask him for $1,000 and see if he will give you that money. So Chris goes on and he doesn't do that now, but then he does it later. Chris goes on and is, of course, to ask his own father, Robert. Yeah, it's late at night, but he still calls him anyways. So Chris is to, of course, ask his dad for $10,000. And his dad is like, $10,000? Like, are you in trouble? Like, is there something that I need to go over and, like, help you with? Like, what's going on? And Chris is just like, no, like, I'm putting together a business. It's like, well, like, can you, like, loan me $1,000? And Robert is just like, no, like, I don't think I can, like, really, like, trust you with money. Like, no, I just, no. So And so Robert is just telling, like, Chris is like, well, how about you just come back home? Like, how about you just come on and just come back home. We'll have you come home. Like, we'll kind of just deal with you. So Chris just hangs up the phone. He's had enough, realizing that Gary was right. So Chris is to be like okay with what's going on. And so Chris, when he was with Gary at Gary's place, Chris was to go on and spend continuous time with Lovely, just kind of eating whatever like Thanksgiving they were preparing, and of course having Chris sleep with Lovely. But then when Chris was to leave, we start to see that out this in this window, we have Gary and we have Lovely that are to kind of be holding one another, and I'm like, So it seems that Lovely was just putting together this act to, of course, make Chris be just persuaded into doing all this, to realize that eventually, like, this is all going to fizzle out in X number of days. So Chris at first is to go along with this. Chris is to start taking pictures of all the bank, and Deputy Ted is to kind of see Chris taking pictures. And so Chris is to mention, like, well, hey, like, I wanted to take pictures for my family to just kind of show them what I do. And so Deputy Ted is like, well, hey man, like, what's a picture without you in it? Like, go on and just take a picture, and yeah. So Chris is taking a picture by the vault. He's holding these donuts. So because like nobody is really gonna believe like Chris anymore. Like if he's in trouble, like people won't believe him. It's just like it's the sad thing, where like Chris is just a guy that um like people like don't like have real trust in, or don't like really believe, and so that's what kind of makes this story all the more interesting, of how exactly is Chris going to go on and tell people that like he was a part of some bank heist and it went horribly awry, and now he's here. No one would really believe him. So, anyways, so it comes the day. And so Gary's to mention that Chris is going to be the lookout of this whole bank heist. And so what happens is we have a getaway driver that's kind of seeing who is kind of driving by. And so the only thing that they have to plan for is whenever Deputy Donut comes in. So Chris, of course, to go on and at first pretending he's doing his job, but then all of a sudden we have Gary and his other guys come in, and they are to, of course, weld through to get to this vault to take all this money. And so at some points we have Chris the night before that was talking to Deputy Ted, and Chris is like, you know what, like, I'm kind of tired of you consistently coming around here, and like I feel that like you're pitying me, and like, you know what, I can go on and get my own donuts. Like I think I know where they are. So Deputy Ted is to just kind of do this out of the niceness or the kindness of his heart to do this stuff. And so when Deputy Ted comes around later and is to mention that his wife is to possibly feel she's feeling some contractions going on, she might feel that the baby's going to come soon. So So we go on and we have like Chris here who is to apologize to, of course, Ted from the night before. And Ted's like, oh no, like, hey, if anything, like, with the way that, like, the way you sometimes are, I can completely get it. I completely understand. So Chris goes on, and so like he kind of shoos off this deputy, and the deputy at one point is that want to come back to bring donuts again. So they come back, and so Chris is forced to get all the money and give it to these thugs, and so they have this vehicle parked out back, this station wagon. So we have, of course, Deputy Ted that has come back with these donuts, and so Deputy Ted is starting to look around in the place because Chris is not answering the door. He all of a sudden sees this welding gear, and then he all of a sudden also sees these reflections of these other people, and so Deputy Ted is starting to put things together, thinking that somebody's going to be in here. Ted is to whip out his gun. We have one guy who comes out of the shadows and starts blasting at Ted. He, of course, misses. So Ted gets into the place and is to shoot the door. The glass breaks, and so he goes in there and he starts taking down certain men. Of course, bringing down Gary. And so Ted is to think that he is to get everybody, and Chris is to tell him that's not true. There is one guy left. And so that guy, of course, is to be the guy that comes out of the shadows and is to shoot Ted and is to kill Ted, sadly. So Chris then is to run off while the shooting is happening, run to this station wagon because he doesn't have his key to his own car. So Chris runs off, gets in the station wagon, is to drive off, and now he is the guy with the money and the power. So we have Chris driving off, and so we, of course, have it where Chris is to park this car, and since Gary is to know where Chris lives, Gary goes to Chris's place and is to basically be holding a gun on Lewis. Even though there might not be an actual gun there, like, we realize that, like, Lewis's life is at risk. So Chris is to call Lewis and is to say, like, hey, like, are things okay? Because if anything, lights are on. And so the more and more Chris talks to Lewis, we realize that Gary is to kind of pick up the phone and just be like, well, hey, like, you go on and give them money and we'll give you Lewis. And Chris is just like, no. So we have Chris that comes up with this plan that he's going to go on, and at 6 o'clock, they're all going to meet up at this location. And so then Chris is to make this ultimate plan to go on and shoot a number of these guys, kill a number of these guys, and then he is to also go on and hide this money by this road that, of course, that he's very familiar with. And so Chris is to have all these plans. So, and he's also to get his guns from his father's place, because Chris is to go back to his mother and father's place and is to kind of orchestrate this plan, because he only has one place to really go back to, and that's really his parents' place temporarily. So Chris goes on and he is to orchestrate this plan, and so we have Chris that is to meet up with these guys at 6 o'clock, and so Lewis is there. So they go on and we have Gary now at this like skating rink, and they're wanting to ask Chris. It's like, well, hey, where is it? And Chris, of course, is like, well, I don't remember. I don't remember where I stashed the money. And so Gary starts thumbing through Chris's notes, and he's like, well, like within your notes, like you did like list where it is. And so like it's only the one road that you can remember, and so like this is the road. So they go on and they have Lewis, they have Chris, they have Gary, and I think they have a guy named Bone that we kind of see in the corner here, of the corner of this picture. So we have Bone, of course, having Chris dig these bags back up, and so one of the bags there's to be the shotgun, but Chris has to remember which bag has the shotgun in it. So Chris is to go on and is to give one of the guys one of the bags, and so the other bag has a shotgun in it, and so Chris to fire the shotgun and kill the other guy while Gary is just kind of bleeding out here. We had Lewis at one point that was thinking that it was possible that he was dead because no one's talking to him, and Chris is like, no, like you're not dead, because Lewis wasn't sure if he had gotten shot or not, so he was just kind of double checking and just like, like I don't know what's going on. So Chris is to confirm to Lewis that he's not dead, and so we slowly but surely start to see like Gary starting to bleed out here. So we go on and we have Gary asking Chris one last question, and then eventually Chris is to see Gary just die here. So Chris's plan afterwards was to go on and not keep the money, but instead he returned the money. He returned the money to the right authorities, and he told him like his whole story, and told him what they of course had done. And so it seems like there's a camera recording that can corroborate this story, or corroborate that could tie with this story. And so, and plus they immediately thought that Chris couldn't have pulled this off anyways, so like, because of course. So we go on, and I guess this is to just make Chris a hero, so much so that after this it seems that Chris was to go on and get that loan from this bank, because I guess they were to really be trusting Chris because town hero. And so they go on, and both Chris and both Lewis are to both do this whole like lose your lunch restaurant. And so Chris is to mention at some point that his father is to stop by and get a meal, and Chris's previous boss, Mr. Tuttle, is to come in from time to time and tell him that he gave him the wrong amount of money back. So, but it seems that both Lewis and both Chris, like, things are working out well. And like that's how the story just kind of fizzles out and finishes up. Like, we don't see Chris back with Lovely, but we also had one moment where Chris was tempted to want to go back and talk to Kelly, which was actually Laura Vandervoort, if I'm saying that correctly, the girl who plays Supergirl in Smallville. And a number of other things also. She's in like Bitten and a lot of other stuff, but still. So we have the moment where we found out that Kelly, during that accident, was to have like a prosthetic leg. And we found out in this dream sequence that Kelly, when talking with Chris, is to say it's like, well, hey, like it's a part of me now. And all of a sudden, Chris to kind of wake up and like realize that like there's so much from that accident that like really is probably never gonna have Chris get the life back that he was to have with Kelly and everybody. But like at least he has this restaurant now. At least it seems that uh, like things can go on and be uh, like really fun for both Chris and for both Lewis. We also had the one moment that I forgot about where Mr. Tully, when Chris was to show up one day, or Tuttle is to mention to Chris, it's like, well, hey, like I completely get what you're doing, and so hey, we're gonna go on, and we're gonna have you be a teller at some point, because it seems that Mr. Tuttle is to find out that Chris is like putting a number of cards throughout this whole entire place about Chris's head injury, and so like it's kind of forced like this manager's hand to have Chris like go on and have equal opportunity to do a certain job. And so like yeah, like so it kind of forced his hand. And so Chris, after going on uh and having that be the one night where it seems that Chris was going to have to rob this bank, Chris then after that moment was to change his mind, because it seems like there's certain people that are kind of looking out for Chris. And so like it starts to get like a really interesting story uh, for Chris to now just be defiant and being this guy who's going to try to do the right thing and save his friend Lewis at some point. So but anyways, I think hopefully the rest of all this is to all be covered. Happy ending had by all. But other than that, I think I'm gonna get out of here so I can go on and not have to hopefully need to fuse some footage together. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.